In 7 decades of Formula One history, few drivers rival Alain Prost.
And Alain Prost takes the checkered flag. He wins the World Championship.
With McLaren, he won 3 titles, beating some of the fastest drivers who ever raced. His battles with Ayrton Senna are legendary. As teammates, they would do anything to beat each other as they traded titles to both become triple world champions. But Prost's 4th crown came in his most difficult season, and 30 years on, he remembers it like it was yesterday. Hello everyone, it's Tom Clarkson here, and welcome to a very special F1 Beyond the Grid. Alain Prost's title win in 1993 marked his triumphant return to Formula One. He'd spent 1992 on the sidelines after leaving Ferrari dramatically before the end of 1991. It's often said he was fired because he likened his Ferrari to a truck. He disputes that even now. That's a story for another day. In 1993, Prost returned with Williams, replacing 92 world champion Nigel Mansell. At the time, Williams was the best team with the fastest cars. The 1993 FW15C had anti-lock brakes, traction control, and so-called active suspension, which was set up by engineers with laptops. It was so sophisticated that the driver always had ideal settings for each corner. How did Prost cope with this new super advanced car? How did he feel about racing his arch rival, McLaren's Ayrton Senna? How did team boss Frank Williams, tech chief Patrick Head, designer Adrian Newey, and teammate Damon Hill support him? And why was Prost's final triumph his most difficult? These are all questions I asked him in this special interview. I hope you enjoy hearing Alain Prost's memories of 1993. Alain, it is fantastic to have you back on the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. I mean, all good, in fact. All good.
Now, Alain, time flies, doesn't it? 30 years since you won your last World Championship. Of your 4 titles, how do you rate that 93 season?
Excuse me to be a little bit brutal. That is maybe the worst, in fact, because it reflects more or less. I'm going to be very direct, but the way I've been treated sometimes in my career, because 93 was a very strange season. I signed my contract with Frank very, very soon, beginning of 92, in fact, when I had my sabbatical year, and we started to have the argument, with Ayrton. I wanted to drive, but it was the plan, it was done. I mean, the only thing I asked to Frank when we met for the first time talking about the contract, that was in Paris, Le Bourget, at the airport, and said, okay, you give me the money you want. I don't want to be number 1 in the team, but the only thing I ask you is I cannot be a teammate again with Ayrton. And he said, yes, for sure, I understand, and we can put a clause on that. That started like this. But the whole season was really difficult, because I don't want to go through all the episode about the season, but I never felt good. Obviously, when you win a race with Williams at the time, it's normal. When you lose a race, you're stupid, and it's not exactly what a racing driver is aiming for. You need to have a sort of objective situation, and that was not a very nice season. And when we started to have the problem of when Frank came to me and said that I have a pressure from Renault because they want me to take Ayrton, I know that we have a contract, and I said, shit, that's not the best way, to have a 2-year contract. And I know I was very supported by Patrick and Adrian, but we were not in the sportive side, and I said, I want to fight against Ayrton, no problem, on the track, no problem, but not as a teammate, so I cannot accept that. That is why the old 93 season at the end was not my best on the human side.
Let's talk about the competitive side first of all, because It seems to me 1993 was the first time in your career in which you'd gone into the season expecting and expected to dominate. How did that feel, and how did it change your approach?
It changed because of the perception of the people outside. Because for you, when you're a racing driver, I mean, obviously, ask Max today because he has a dominating car. I mean, he's not going to change anything. He's going to try to win all the races he can and win the championship. And for me, it was the same. It was a new technology. It was a new car, a new way of setting up the car or even working with the engineers, which was not my best, my favorite car in terms of. I used to do more or less everything by myself, with working with the engineers, and with the active car, it was more done by the engineers working on the computer, working on suspension. So that is maybe the biggest problem. But otherwise, I did not have a very different approach. I had a fantastic teammate with Damon. He was really helpful. He had more experience than myself on the active car because he was testing the car before. So it was all different, but at the end, your philosophy is the same. The only big difference is you're fighting against Ayrton with a very, very good chassis, because in fact, I drove the same chassis the year after, with the Peugeot engine. Maybe not the same powerful engine that is obvious, but he had, for me, a better suspension, better electronic on the car. And that's what we saw also in Donington on the wet, where we were struggling with the downshifting and things like this. But you cannot explain that. At the end of the day, you could try to explain why you are good or why you're not as good. Nobody understands that in this situation. You always take the defense of the driver looks weak in terms of car, which was not true everywhere. Some places for sure, because our engine was much more powerful. That is true, but it was a very difficult car to drive. Very, very difficult.
So that was its biggest strength, was it? The FW15's engine, because you say the McLaren had the better chassis, the better electronics. So if I was to say to you, what was the Williams' greatest strength, you'd say the engine.
If you compare to the competitors, engine first, but obviously it's always a package. The car was really good some places, much more difficult to drive other places. And, the position in the car for me was not as comfortable than I wanted to. Even Ayrton had the problem, when he replaced me. It was not that easy, the gear change until the middle of the season where we improved that. It was a difficult car to drive considering the performance. Obviously, it was very powerful, and it was no places where we were, far behind. But at the end of the year, if you remember, the last two races in Japan, in Adelaide, I've tried to do my best to finish with a win. It was not possible. The McLaren was much quicker.
So where was the car at its best? I mean, was it one of an open racetrack like Silverstone where you got your 50th win? Was that the sort of racetrack it really shone on?
Yeah, you did not want to have too many bumps. I mean, if you had like Silverstone, obviously long straight because the engine making a small difference, and fast corners. I mean, average speed corner, that was maybe the best. The car was good, but it's difficult to tell because it's if you had a track like Silverstone, or I remember when we were fighting with Ayrton, there was some places where I was much quicker, some places it was much quicker. Is really, really difficult. It looks like the heavy car sometimes and the other light car, which was not the case, I suppose. But we forget. But these two cars, for example, they had a very different technology. In fact, we are talking about active car. But you have different ways, to make the active working. If I look at the Nigel's car the year before that I've tested in Portugal, it was more like a normal car with it was active, but it was more like controlling, the ride height. 93 car was more like a complete active car, with no anti-dive, anti-squat, things like this. And I was making the car much more difficult also to set up. To find the right balance. But if you're having the right balance, that would be a fantastic car.
So if you combine the 93 active system with things like ABS, traction control. What kind of a feel was the car giving you?
My style of driving and my style also, I think, of trying to set up the car is quite different to a lot of drivers. For example, with the Williams, we had the possibility to use the power steering and the ABS on the brakes. If I remember, I never used it. I've tried many times, so maybe one race. I don't remember where it was. I wonder if it was not Silverstone. Maybe we could ask Patrick. But I did not like it because, first of all, I did not have the right feeling for setting up the car, not the way I wanted to. And when I put the active power steering or the ABS, I was losing even more some feeling. So it was not good for me, for my driving style.
Just out of interest, was Damon using power steering and all of those tricks to help him, and you weren't able to?
I could have been able, but I did not like it. I prefer to stay around the old way. Yeah.
Alain, you must have been so strong to to drive those cars without power steering, for goodness sake.
It was not a problem. I mean, it's 30 years ago, so I don't remember which race I used it because maybe it was maybe a little bit too heavy, in terms of steering. But I even do not remember if it was the case.
That 93 season also saw narrower front and rear tyres as well. What difference did that make to the handling?
Oh, if you remember, I had a strong argument with Max Mosley at the beginning of the year about this new rule, because in fact we put these narrow tires for safety reason. And in fact, what I was saying at the time, I remember after my test in Portugal, I said, why we don't test these tires before we make this decision to introduce? It was not a bad, maybe not a bad idea, but at the end of the day, you were quicker in the straight, and not much slower into the corners. So did not make a big difference. Yeah, racing driver, normally you can adapt your style to almost everything. That was not a big change.
We live in a world that's more digital than ever, with nearly every want or need catered for and just a tap away. We see something we want online, and sometimes within a day or even a few hours, it's in our hands after being delivered directly to our doorstep. It's quite amazing how seamlessly many of our favourite digital services translate to the physical world, isn't it? But until now, that hasn't been true for crypto. Digital currencies have been tied up online with no easy way to bring them into the real world. So you might have generated a large amount of money online, but were limited in how you accessed it, which isn't very helpful when you're in need of a physical cash injection for any unexpected daily life expenses. That's why we're so excited to share that you can now cash in and out of selected digital wallets at participating MoneyGram locations without a bank, credit card or debit card. It couldn't be easier. Convert your digital currency to cash and back again using the only digital wallets with real cash access activated by MoneyGram. Learn more at moneygram.com/Stellar Wallets. That's moneygram.com/Stellar Wallets. Alain, tell us a little bit more about what it was like racing for Williams. First up, how did the team compare to McLaren in particular, that other British titan?
Yeah, that's a difficult question for me because it's, as I said before, the whole ambience was a bit strange. You had obviously the Williams team, and then you had Renault on one side, and then you had Ayrton's phantom, about the signing, and were trying to get there in the team. So, and the media, because the media, they were not very nice to me, at the time, because, as I said, you support the guy with normally the weakest car. So at McLaren, I had different, obviously, period. If you take that with Nicky and with Stefan and with Keke, it was fantastic. With Ayrton, the first year was really fantastic, really a big fight. 89 was again a nightmare because of the situation. But at McLaren, I had much more a family team, and difficult to compare because I was really good friend with Ron and especially Mansour, and from the beginning, for many, many years. So it was a bit different. And when Ayrton came, for sure, our friendship was a little bit different. I always wanted to support the team and get the best decisions for the team. That is why also I have supported the fact that Ayrton should come in the team and not Nelson at the time.
Could you have vetoed Ayrton's arrival at McLaren?
I had nothing contractually, but I think it would have been easy for me at the time to say, no, I prefer to have Nelson, I prefer to have somebody. And when we were in a meeting in Japan, with all the people were talking about that, and no, we were going to with Nelson, which is good friend. But I said, why you don't take the young guy? I mean, Ayrton is the future of the Formula One. It should be the future of the team. Saying that today looks stupid, but that was the philosophy at the time. I was always doing everything for McLaren. I was going with Ron with all the important meetings. I was going to find sponsors. I was going to, all the sponsors have been almost with Ron together. That is not the way that you're working now into Formula One. It's very, very different. So with Frank, with Williams, it was a different atmosphere. Very, very close with the racing team, very, very close. But it is also an attitude that for Latin drivers like me, where you're sensible, you want to have a sort of a relation, it's different. It's a different culture. I really do not criticize. I do not criticize at all, but it's good. This ambience is good for some drivers and maybe not as good for other drivers. McLaren at the time, I don't know the team today because it's different, but I think everybody could feel more or less quite well, except that sometimes they have a favorite, but at least you are in a family.
It seems to me that at McLaren you were more than just a racing driver, whereas at Williams you were just that, the racing driver.
Yes, but it's not hidden. I'll be honest about that, You are a racing driver, so you are an employee. So you do more or less what we want you to do. And I remember when I made my seat the first time at Williams, it was struggling a little bit difficult. I'm really a pain in the ass, sometimes to make a proper seat because I like my the good position, the comfort, everything. At the end of the day, I said, no, sorry, but you have to make the seat with Nigel's seat. So I took Nigel's seat. And then I modified everything, for adopting Nigel's seat, because it was easier to make it. It's like this, and Ayrton was complaining about a lot of different things. He was calling me many times to ask me advices. So it's a different culture, different mentality, and you have to accept it. But when you're there, if everything goes well, it's fantastic. But on the human side, it's not as easy to other places.
What was it like working with Patrick Head, and how did that experience compare with someone like John Barnard at McLaren?
I think they have a very similar, let's say, culture. I love working with both, John and Patrick, honestly. Patrick was much, let's say, stronger. That means sometimes he could be a little bit more brutal, but they are really passionate people, passionate by the technology, and I think John was maybe a little bit more open. If you tell him, John, sorry, but it's not working, or it's not the way to go, or he would accept it more than Patrick. Patrick was really, really, really strong. Again, because the philosophy of the driver should not be too important, and the philosophy at McLaren at the time with John was maybe a little bit easier.
One more technical person I'd love to ask you about was Adrian Newey, because of course he designed the FW15C. He's still going strong today. What did you make of Adrian all those years ago?
I worked with Adrian for sure at Williams. I also a little bit at McLaren, but in a different role. And I remember '93 season, and even after looking at him, and even now looking at him from outside sometimes, because you see him very often, and it is very different, because I remember at Williams 93, obviously you can be very confident with Adrian, but don't forget that Patrick was above him in a way. It was a bit different organization, but I love talking to Adrian. But Adrian is listening to you, asking questions all the time. You never have an argument with Adrian. You're talking with Adrian, and he's listening. And then he does what he thinks is the best. But it never tells you what he's going to do, or if you're right or if you're wrong. Nothing. Just listening and talking. I love that. That is why it's the best, because you know why? Because everybody thinks that Adrian is still one engineer. I mean, I don't know now, but he was at McLaren. I remember going in his office and drawing some part of the car, saying I did by hand. It's unbelievable. But also the ways he's working and listening, and it's fantastic for the engineers working with him. It brings energy, and the synergy in terms of the brain capacity is fantastic.
Checo Perez told us on this podcast that when you're talking to Adrian, it's like you're talking to another racing driver.
Yeah.
He understood your concerns as if he was a driver. Did you find it the same back then?
Yeah, in a way, yes, for sure. When I was with him in '93, as a racing driver, I'm talking, I did not know that he was also driving, or for sure there you can feel the passion. There is no doubt about it. But I didn't know, but Adrian would never tell you, okay, I drove this car, or I drove that, I felt that, and do you feel the same or whatever. Never compare anything, because he knows the Formula One is very different. But at least he has the attitude of, in fact, we are very similar. As I said, you always listen. And if you are a racing driver, you always want to have the best, and Adrian is the same. And that is why he will talk to you, not asking questions, but the answer is going to be natural, because it's like part of your family. Is very different. Yeah.
And he's also ferociously competitive as well. That's another thing that the Red Bull guys tell me.
Yes, because I saw him, that's my experience I had with him a little bit when I was at Renault. And we had a few mechanical failures with the engine. I was the one that Renault pushed, to go and talk to the Max family and Adrian or Helmut or Christian. I tell you, I remember in Spa, going to the office, and I was almost afraid, but anyway, it was not a good experience. But I saw Adrian very, very upset sometimes, very upset, because he's a competitor, and he thinks that he's making the best car, and he wants to have the result. And if it's because of the engine or reliability, he cannot accept that. But I saw him a real competitor, but sometimes he can be angry, because I never saw him like this before. And he's not young. He has a fantastic experience, fantastic records, but he's still there, motivated, and being angry like he was. I really myself appreciate that, very much.
Now, with Adrian, with Patrick, how much did you improve the car during the course of the 93 season?
That was my biggest problem. I had to drive the car. I had to adapt more or less the car to my driving style. But I would say maybe I have adapted the car by 10 or 20%, and I have to adapt my style and philosophy myself about 80% to the car. That was
Wow.
That was very difficult for me. I like to go and I like to set up the car. I like to try different things. I remember many times I wanted to go in a direction and come back to the pit and say, that's a mistake, and we have to go back. But you're talking, because on the active car, 93, was really, really difficult. It was so different that it's very difficult for me to tell you, in the 80s, with the McLaren and even with the Ferrari, I almost remember some full setup of some races, the car. I remember very well what I was doing. On the active car, I do not remember anything, because I remember Paddy Lowe was coming with the computer on the side port, and then He was telling me what was, going on. And I remember when we were testing, I think it was Ricard the first time. I mean, you realize that going flat through senior, it was much easier to go flat than lifting the throttle a little bit before the corner, because it's the way the active is working too. So I said, shit, I have to adapt myself to a different way of not only driving, but thinking, because sometimes I really wanted to, that was also my philosophy, to drive, let's say, 85, 90% on the car. Because when you drive a little bit, not at 100%, you have time to think. You have time to realize if this thing is a little bit better or not. And also, you know that you have a margin. But with the active car, if you do that, when you go full throttle, then maybe you don't find the same car, you don't find the same advantages. So it was a different way of working for me.
Did you have enough time to get up to speed? Because, of course, you sat out 92. And how did that affect you in terms of, did it take you a while just to get back into it? Did you feel as good as you'd been in 91 straight away, or did it take a few laps?
When I drove the back, I was only about 4 months or 5 months before I was driving a car, because I drove also the Ligier, if you remember, for Ricard, and then when I drove the Nigel's car in September at Estoril, I really felt very, very good. This car was much more easier to drive, very good. And when we came back to Estoril with the 93 car, that was difficult. I even said to myself, oh shit, I came back, but that was difficult in many, many aspects. Even physically, it was not easy, because the car was jumping, the position was not good, as I was explaining to you. So it was not that easy. When we had the first race in KLME, very difficult for me to use the fresh tires for qualifying. I remember, because we were not doing many tests for that, and I was never very, very good to make the tires work on one lap, because of my driving style. And we were doing 2 laps, for example. I mean, one installation lap, or one slow lap, and one quick lap. And the last set, I've decided to go for 1 lap, just pushing a little bit more the first lap, and then I made the pole. That was quite a big difference. I think I was about 8 tenths behind Ayrton before this last set. And then I made the pole by, 2-3 tenths ahead. A huge difference. When you make the tires working on 1 lap, it makes a huge difference. I know that. So yes, on this side, maybe I would need more experience, but it was all new for me. And that's why also Damon was a big help, because he knew the car. He was a little bit behind some races, and some races he was very difficult to beat, So it was good for me to have this balance.
Did you ever have the conversation with the team about reverting back to the 92 car for the start of the 93 season?
We had a discussion, and we even had some tests at the beginning of the year at Silverstone. I remember very well. Yeah.
And how did those conversations go with Patrick? Did he even entertain the thought of using last year's car?
Yeah, I remember very well. I don't remember all the words, but he said, no, I understand, but you have more potential with this one for the future, which may be correct, but that was the last year of the active car anyway. So it would, in my opinion, would have been much easier, but it's the way it is.
At the races where you say Damon was very difficult to beat, what was Damon like in those races? What were his greatest strengths as a driver?
Again, with these cars, if you feel confident with the car, you can really push. And the more you push with this car, the more you get performance. Also, because depending on the setup, as I said to you, if you have a control role, for example, control pitch or whatever, I mean, sometimes when you find the right balance, and then you can push, then you can make a difference. There's a few places where it was very difficult to beat. Even Silverstone, if I remember Silverstone, he had an engine failure. It would have been difficult to beat, even if I was blocked behind Ayrton for a few laps.
Oh, Alain, that moment coming through Abbey where I thought you had the inside line, and there's a wonderful bit of in-car footage if anyone wants to see it, where, okay, Prost's through. No, he's not. Senna's still holding on round the outside. I mean, wow.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest moments. Honestly, it was really, really, really close.
Yeah.
Really close. I don't know what would happen if we touched there.
Alain, how would you describe your relationship with Senna in '93? Was it more friendly than it had been when you were at Ferrari?
I don't know. It was middle of '89. We had no. I don't remember if we had any talk or any nothing. No contact. It was like a driver that you never see. Which is not easy. But no, the relation started again after the podium in Adelaide.
Okay, but before then, it was just rivals and nothing more. No, nothing on the human side.
No, nothing inside. But as I said, no contact, no relation.
Well, obviously, there was no conversation about you telling Frank that you didn't want Ayrton as your teammate. He didn't try and take you to one side and persuade you otherwise.
No, he did not try to myself. He was using the media about that, but he knew from long time that was the case. It's I really felt bad about this story because it's normal. It's when he goes into a team, and like many others, they all ask for a number one driver contract. I never asked for a number one driver contract. I never been number one. I've even been number two behind Nicky, for example, the first year in '84. That was really clear on the contract. But I mean, you can understand, and everybody should realize and accept that I could not go to another team. Being a teammate with Ayrton, I had no problem to fight against him, myself at Ferrari and himself at McLaren, not doing what I've done in the same team, working twice harder, doing all the tests and in winter and when he was resting in Brazil, whatever. And all these things, you don't want to have it. It's very important to have a good relation with the teammate, but a very balanced relation, and I had a fantastic relation with Nicky, with Keke, with Stefan, for sure, with Damon, with a lot, and much more than we think, and that is good for the team. Obviously, okay, some people would say it's easy because he had the advantage, but you can create your advantage, and I knew that with Ayrton, I could not work the same way.
Would you have welcomed Nigel Mansell back as your teammate for '93 had he stayed at Williams?
When I signed the contract, if I remember, it was January or February, so it was really, really soon in the season. The discussion was very clear. I said, the only one I do not want as a teammate is Ayrton, and you understand why. I even do not remember if it's not Frank who has proposed that, because he knew that it wouldn't be possible. I mean, I had no idea about my teammate, and I was sure that it would be Nigel at the time. I did not know that it would be Damon. That was January, February. I had no problem with that. I could not understand, I could not believe they would change two drivers together in the team.
And what did you make of Ayrton's $1 million per race deal in '93? Were you surprised that Ron Dennis agreed to that?
First of all, I don't know if it's true.
Okay. I think Julian Jacobi talks about it, but anyway.
Yeah. I don't know if it's true. I did not check myself. And honestly, when you're talking about money and the drivers, how much they earn compared to me, for example, in the past, I really don't care at all. I know that Nicky was paid more than me. Ayrton was paid more than me. Maybe Nigel at Ferrari, maybe more than me. I really don't care.
Yeah. Can we just talk about the Portuguese Grand Prix now? How tough was it for you to announce your retirement during the build-up to that weekend?
It was not difficult at all. The only difficulty was mathematically I was not world champion, and obviously I have announced my retirement before the race and before I was world champion, but I had to secure my title. I made the decision, I think it was about 1 month before. I was in south of France, in a house of friends, and I said to the guy from McCormack and the Rampel that, okay, now I have enough, because I said to Frank, okay, discussion with Ayrton is closed. or you stop talking about that because I have a contract and I don't want to hear that anymore, or I can propose that you pay me the contract for 90, I had for 94, and then I retire, and then it's one or the other. And they have accepted, they have decided the second option. That was by the time we made all the documents, and that was in August, beginning of August, I think, and I have announced in September. That was not by when you make a decision like this, it was more sort of a freedom that I felt because it was a bit too much, you don't go racing with this kind of atmosphere, and I was really in a weak position, especially the media was not very, very nice, and at the end of the day, even on the human side, you need to make these things and enjoy, and I was not enjoying as much.
What was the reaction in the paddock to your retirement? What did Ayrton say?
Nothing, because he did not talk, and the only thing that Ayrton said the first time he talked to me again, that was on the podium first, but especially after the podium, and he asked me already that he wanted me to come back. Because
in Adelaide?
The Williams, I go Adelaide already, yeah. Maybe 1 hour later, he said, "Yeah, we don't want to stop, and you're going to get fat." And why? And then 1 week after, he called me, and then when he heard that Ron asked me to test the car, I said, "Oh yeah, that would be good, and please come back, and I will be more motivated." So that was very nice discussion, but yeah, it was so. I mean, I could not expect that. It's so different.
You say so different behaviourally, but do you think you and Ayrton Senna were actually very similar people, and that is why you clashed so much?
No, I would not say that. No, we are very different driving style, especially at the beginning, maybe not at the end. Very different way of working inside the team, very different thinking, different education, different mentality also. I would say very different.
And at the time, did you think you'd get another chance in Formula One, or were you aware that was probably it?
I never thought this way. I had to stop. In '89, I had a proposal from Ron of a 3-year contract, a new contract, when we were together with Ayrton in '89, which is really hot, because it was really one of the worst periods. And I said no when I've decided to say no and to announce that I will not drive for McLaren anymore. Everybody knows in the paddock at the time, I had no contact. I had no security that I could drive a Formula One again. That's the way I am, in a way. I mean, I was not happy. I did not want to be unhappy again. Could not feel that I could do the same thing and enjoying what I was doing. I am a passionate guy about motor racing, about racing, but not only racing, is also the working in a team, working with the engineers, and I have a lot of fun when I can do that very closely to them, and I did not enjoy anymore, and I stopped. And I was ready or to have a 1-year sabbatical or stop completely, So what you ask me in '93, I did not care about if I was, you have different opportunities. McLaren with the Peugeot engine was an opportunity with a lot of money, in fact, a lot of money. And I said no. And then I had very close to another opportunity at one stage with McLaren a few years later, even at Ferrari, when I talked with Jean, and at the beginning with Michael. Michael was there. And I said, if I go there, I mean, we had a discussion with Jean. I said, okay, we have to be clear. If I go there, I am a number 2, and I try to help Ferrari and Michael to win a championship, because that would be a sort of it's a clear attitude. I don't want to have any argument or things with the press, with media, or whatever. Michael is number 1, I'm number 2, and I'm here to help. That could have been a possibility. It did not work, but
Alain Prost, I'm not having that. You going to Ferrari as a number 2, I can't see the competitive beast in you.
It's only to be part of Ferrari's success for many, many years. And that was part of the challenge, And the human side, because the human side is much more important than you think. or people think is very important to me. If you're in a team and say, okay, I am here for that. I am an employee again, but I'm going to help Jean-Todt, I'm going to help the people, and obviously Michael, because there's no way I could compete with Michael after retiring for, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 years and then come back. But then I could help. Maybe I could be so that could have been a challenge. Maybe it would be a crazy challenge, but I was very close to. we were talking about that with Jean, not for long, but we were talking.
Why didn't it happen?
Ask Jean, because maybe we find that it would be difficult to do it. I even do not remember who they took to, but at the same time, but maybe it's better not having done it. But you understand the philosophy it was really clear. Yeah.
I was winding you up, but I just a man with your record and your level of ability, it seems an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, but it's part. You do things when you are 20, you don't do the same 40, and not do the same at 60. So it's you have to accept and then be part of a new project or challenge. And why not? Why not? At least when it's clear, why not?
Formula One is a funny business, isn't it? In that you think how it ended with Ferrari in 91, and yet just a handful of years later, you're having conversations about going back there. It's
no, but don't ask me. It's going to be too long to talk about Ferrari 91. But Ferrari 91 at the end with the truck is something that people do not understand, and I'm going to explain in my documentary exactly what happened, but the only thing, when you talk to me about the truck situation, I can do the same answer than I do to everybody. Have you ever listened to the interview when I talk about the truck? Tell me one person who has seen the interview about the truck in your Formula One life in the last 30 years, okay? If you show me somebody who has seen the interview of the truck, okay, please present it to me.
That is interesting. So are you saying that you were misquoted?
No, I was completely politically, they took this opportunity. I talk about the truck because for one reason, but that was only smiling with my race engineer at the time, Luigi Mazzola, because I touched a car at the beginning of the race, at the first corner, and I had the steering bent, and steering was bent, and the steering was so heavy. That was maybe one of the best races in my life. I finished 4th. I remember Jean finished 6th, and I could not do better. And I showed to the people who were there, so you see, look, it was so unbelievable. You could not move the steering. And I said, what can I do? I was feeling to drive a truck and things like this. That was on the funny thing. But they used that because at the same moment, I was having more than a discussion, preparing a contract with Henri Peter, who was a lawyer of Ferrari, talking about being a driver and a sportive director at the moment for the 92 season. And for sure, this decision or this move, a lot of people did not like it, and they used that. But never seen. And when we started the process of an action from my part, with the lawyers, we sat on the table, and I remember if Luca was there, the car just arrived. I said, okay, before we start, just show me the interview. And they could not, because this interview has been banned from the Thursday, and nobody has saw it, nobody. And if you see it, obviously you will understand. In my career, that was really bad because I love Ferrari. 1990 season was unbelievable, like a dream. And I really regret that we only have this sort of stamp about the Ferrari and Prost talking about the truck, which was not. I wanted to have the best for the team. I still want to have the best. It's unbelievable to have this, this brand in a country like Italy. And you're always part of the Ferrari family when you go through it, but forget that. But what I lived is really unbelievable, because I could not believe that you could live this kind of situation, because it goes like a sphere of the stage, and nothing you can do.
Well, I'm now starting to understand why you attempted to go back, just to complete the circle. You love Ferrari.
2 weeks 3 weeks after Japan, when I was in Australia already. 3 weeks after, I met Luca de Montezemolo because it just arrived, and we were talking about me coming back already. But it was too late because we started the process, and I thought it was not good, and I already had an approach with Frank, with Williams, and Renault. So I said, okay, forget it. But it was very close.
When you look at the pace of the 92 Ferrari, I think you got away with that one, Alain.
Honestly, I am going to have my moment of being proud and maybe not too much humility, but everything I have said was more or less correct. There's no way you were going in downside, but there's nothing. The truck thing is completely different. I was working very hard to make the Ferrari competitive. There was too much politics at the time, much too much. Yeah.
As it transpired, Adelaide 93 was your 199th and final Grand Prix. How difficult was it for you to move on from racing?
It was, I think it should be more or less the same for everybody. You are very happy. You feel free for very little time. And then the first few weeks, I would say you wake up at 9 or 10 o'clock. And then you realize that you're very young and you don't want to have this kind of life. And you need to, when you have a project or a target or whatever you call that every day in your life when you have started that, very, very young. So no way, you cannot. But it's good to have. I had about 3 months, very good, but starting to think about that, it's good. You need to have a break sometimes. And then I started again, and I never felt unhappy at all. Never.
Have you found anything that has replaced the buzz of racing a Formula One car?
Funny you asked that, because I remember I had an interview maybe 1 or 2 years before that, or 2, maybe more than that. I said that I know there's nothing else that can replace Formula One in my life in the future. Nothing. You cannot have something, especially if you are winning. In no way you can have substitute. You can have other passion. You can have hobbies. You can have a lot of things. Family, friends, whatever but it's very different to Formula One. But when you know that, you are not disappointed. I never regret. Never say, oh, should have not stopped or whatever. Never. Because it was for a different reason.
And you've been training hard on a bike for the last 30 years, as far as I can make out.
Yeah, but bike is a hobby. I've had a hobby with tennis, with golf, with a lot of things, and I've been passionate by a lot of. I'm always in movement, so I've done a lot of different business that nobody knows, and I always had a very busy life with a different interest, which is I could not expect better than that.
Alain, it's been, as ever, wonderful to talk to you. Thank you for sharing your memories and your pin-sharp memory as well. You remember it all like it was yesterday.
It was yesterday. It was yesterday.
Oh,
I have
goodness.
a good memory. Yeah. Sometimes it's not good, because sometimes I will think to myself, it's maybe better to forget everything and then telling about no, I remember everything.
Alain, it's wonderful, and I hope we see you at lots of races this year. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye, Tom. Thank you.
Isn't it fascinating that Alain's most dominant title win was also his least satisfying? The car didn't give him the feeling he needed to be comfortable, yet he still took 13 pole positions and 7 victories. I loved all the details about the 1993 Williams, including the fact that he had to use an adapted version of Nigel Mansell's seat from the previous year. Anyone who's seen Nigel and Alain next to each other, as I have, will know that they have very different body shapes, but that's a detail that tells you so much about the team at the time. He also gave us wonderful insight into his conversations with Ferrari. Imagine him coming back as Michael Schumacher's number 2 to help Michael win the title. What a super team that would have been. I loved every second of that chat with Alain, and I hope you at home did too. And Alain, thank you very much for your time, and see you soon. Now, as ever, please send in your thoughts and stories about Alain Prost. What do you remember of that 1993 season? Send them to me at Tom Clarkson F1 on Twitter or use the hashtag F1BeyondTheGrid. Which brings me on to what you sent in about Laurent Rossi after last week's show. Wasn't it great to hear from the big boss of Alpine? Let's start with this from Janet Duff. I loved hearing what Laurent was saying about Pierre and Esteban and how they could rekindle their childhood friendship this year. That would be just great. Well, everything I've seen so far, Janet, suggests that they are pleased to be racing alongside each other at the moment, but let's wait and see how it all pans out. Next, let's hear from Bramwell. Great interview. Fundamentally, Renault cannot ever spend in 1 year what the likes of Merck, Red Bull or Lawrence Stroll can. With all that in mind, I think their approach is great. Thanks, Bramwell, for that. F1 is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. Alpine are unique, and they will try to win their way. Good luck to them. And finally, let's have this from John. Great show. It's made me want to buy an Alpine. Well, thanks for that, John. You are the epitome of listen on Sunday, buy on Monday. I like that, John. Now, thank you to all of you for your messages, and please remember to give me your thoughts on Alain Prost in time for next week's show, and I'll read some out. And please follow and review the podcast if you haven't already, and share it with a friend. And one more thing, F1 Nation's preview of this weekend's Saudi Arabian Grand Prix is out now. Just search for F1 Nation to listen to that. Thanks for listening. F1 Beyond the Grid is produced by F1 and Audio Boom Studios. Until next time, keep it flat out.